what's the word? And we punch a ticket. Come aboard, climb aboard. So, how you doing? You get your ticket yet? Want your ticket?
Yeah.
Would you like a ticket?
What's the ticket?
Even pup. What's the ticket? Ticket is to get aboard the train.
Oh.
So it's just like you do. You want a ticket? Would you
Yes,
like a
please.
ticket? Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
So tell us a little bit about the Caboose. When it was, where it was.
Railroads started in railroads were started in 1827, and a caboose was started in 1863. And they started cabooses for the reason of that they needed somebody to be back here to watch the train. So there was a gentleman. Linda knows the story better. Let her tell the rest of the story.
There's a gentleman they had a boxcar at the back of the train, and it was not a caboose per se, but it had a hole in the roof. So he stacked up some stuff and looked through the hole in the roof so he could see the rest of the train. Made sure it hadn't derailed, made sure nothing had caught on fire or the loads hadn't shifted. Well, he did that for a while, and then he said, no, you're going to have to build me something so I don't have this wind in my face.
Bugs.
And so they built the cupola.
This is called a cupola. And a cupola was designed for the men to work out of. Here's an explanation of the cupola here. And it was for them to work out of to see the train, which made it a lot easier to work out of course. And then they
Years ago, they had oil bearings.
Yeah, the bearings had oil in them, and so they would catch on fire and stuff. So, or the train would break or something else, you know. So they had to have somewhere to work out of. So they had a place to work out of where they could, of course, have their supplies, their wrenches, their tools, and they had to have replacement parts. And then so they would store their stuff in certain cabinets and things, store their supplies and stuff so they could fix the train along the way. So you would have a conductor and a rear brakeman back here. And then you would have a fireman, an engineer, and a front brakeman on the engine. So I started in these things back in the 70s when I was a young man.
Well, you were in a caboose?
I was in a caboose back in the 70s.
Caboose rider, a real...
And now I am a locomotive engineer. I run trains now. I run locomotive trains for Metra and Union Pacific, and I did run freight for the longest time. So I'm ready to retire, and we're going to try to do this full-time event where we can have this accessible to the public because we think it's a piece of history and it needs to be shown.
So what do you want to restore of it? Just to make it safe, or are you going to actually...
Right, so it doesn't rot away. Let's give you, for instance, like, you know, roof needs repair, windows need repair, updating with electric, because it does have electric in it for the oil, for the lamps and lighting. Use it for Christmas, to light up for Christmas. We have a tree lighting coming up soon, right? And in Twin Lakes, we have a beautiful tree lighting, and the caboose is available.
Would you sleep on the caboose?
Absolutely. Most of their, each caboose had each crew had a certain caboose assigned to them. It was their caboose. It was the conductor and the rear brakeman's caboose. Theirs. It was theirs, and they would sleep, eat, and anything else out of the caboose. Everything was done out of the caboose. Just a little bit. So you had to pass the time. So
Yeah.
they would have the cots for sleeping. They had a fire going to cook.
Were
So
those
they
the
would have
actual
to
cuts, or are those just benches built?
Those are the original. Everything in here is pretty much original, other than the stove that used to be a flat top stove, so they could cook their coffee and their foods on the flat top stove.
And they would sit up here during their shifts? And
Yeah,
just
during
watch
their
the train?
shift, as the train was moving, the brakeman would sit up there in the cupola. When the train went this way, you'd have to sit in and keep an eye on the train, right, in the curve. When the train went this way, you'd have to jump up here to sit on this side and look at the train. Make sure the train was safe, no shifted loads, no danger to the train, you know, make sure everything was running okay,
Yeah.
doing okay. Yeah.
That's really interesting. What do you think, Josh?
It's a part of history that was given up back in the 80s because for several reasons. These were very dangerous to run. You could see we had seatbelts way before cars had seatbelts. So we had seatbelts because it was so dangerous they would rock.
The wind?
Like that. No, not just the wind, the rail, and the engineer, depending on how he drove the train, it was what's called slack. You slack, and you be part of the slack. They would throw you literally on the ground.
It's like a whip.
So it would be like, just like a whip. Exactly what it would be just like a whip. And it was very dangerous and very rocky in here. I drove in these things as a young man, and I went to. So I
Would
went
it
up
have
to.
been better if these were weighted heavier?
You can't weigh them. There's nothing to put weight in them. You know, so it would have been better. So.
You have any questions? I mean, you love trains. You have all kinds
You
of
do?
trains in your-
Yeah, I'm a train nut too. I have train sets. I set up a train set for Christmas here. First time in 20 years. It's been a train set. They have a Christmas display. I put it up west of the eye. Had it in the paper. So, and it was for the tree lighting. When we do the tree lighting in December, I don't know, 11th, what is it? Something like that. So yeah. But
What questions you got? This is like a real conductor.
these basically they were buttons. When they finally got communication in them, they would press these buttons for the engineer. So if he felt like he had to stop, but that was over time. They didn't have them at first. Basically what they would do, I'm going to turn it this way a little bit. When they first started these cabooses, they work off of air. So what they would do is that when they went up to slow their train down and tell the engineer it's time to stop, this is an air valve. They would take the air valve and reduce the air. That would stop the train. The engineer knew to stop and it was time to do work. And then they went to a little bit of wiring and would push the button. But at first, they had to do through an air valve. That's the original air valve in here, and they would have. That's how they would slow down the train.
Huh. And they would do that from the caboose. Why wouldn't the
Right.
conductor have made the decisions when to slow down?
He was sitting right here. He was making this. This is his spot. He's not up by the engine. The engine has enough people. It had the engineer. It had a fireman. Because back in the day,
So the conductor was in the caboose.
right here. He said,
Josh,
"Hey, Dan!
We're the
Hey,
last-
brother!"
The conductor was in the caboose, not in the
No.
locomotive.
What was in the engine in the locomotive was the engineer, like me, and then he had a fireman, which was an assistant.
Yeah.
And back in the day, of course, they had to fire coal,
yeah.
but then that changed. And then they had a head brakeman, and that was a man with the least seniority of the crew. And he would be up in the front because he had to do all the work and stuff.
I thought the front would have been like
No.
where the conductor was.
No.
Did you know that?
You
Did know
kidding?
that?
The
You
conductor
knew
wants to be back here where he can lay down and take
Yeah,
it
Mark,
easy.
a little push.
They're a little bit lazy. So.
This is an engineer speaking.
But they had oil in them. And not very safe either, being the caboose did this. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But these each contained oil. You know, okay? And then they had their water cooler, and they had their food stored there, and they had a place to store ice and a place to store their tools. And this is what usually they would burn coal because it was the easiest to get, because it was laying along the tracks. So they would just pick it up and fill their bins because we had coal trains.
And Nicole was for the stove.
And then they would light their stove, and heat their stove.
This is most likely not an
That's not
original
the original.
stove because the stoves had flat tops on them
To be
And they
cooked.
would-
so that they could cook and they could make coffee and stuff. And the
Yeah.
stoves, the flat tops
Oh,
would have a
perfect.
lip
Oh,
on
very good.
the
Kim
edge.
Cook.
So,
That's the
right.
boss. She is the boss, right, Dan?
Always works that way.
This is my wonderful neighbor, Dan. So, and basically this is just a part of history, and I just couldn't see it like go to waste anymore. I just couldn't see it.
So when did this actually get placed here?
Approximately
70s?
20 plus years ago, and this is the process it took when it was donated. They brought a big crane here, and they set this thing in place. Right, I can't remember the exact date. I will find out. And then there's some more pictures. This is the caboose in action. When it was, there's the original railroad right there. This particular caboose ran on Minnesota line. There is what's called the you have KD County Road there.
Yeah.
There was a KD line. So the KD line ran all the way from Kenosha. The KD line started, went through, of course, through Silver Lake and Twin Lakes and everything. Went and got their ice from Esh Road. Picked up, picked up their ice. Continued down all the way to Harvard, all the way to Rockford, and that was the end of their line. So that was their run, right there.
And it was freight?
Freight. It was all a freight run. This caboose, or this depot was the original depot. I guess I was told it was up on the hill. And that
This
is
one,
the-
this
that's the
building?
original depot.
For the freight, or was this bringing
It was a
people
depot for picking up people.
for
or
Chicago?
freight.
I thought it would be for Chicago tourism back in the turn of the century.
Basically it was the depot for Twin Lakes. Like every
All
town
train
had to have a
lines.
station.
Right.
They had stations, locations. So I guess from what I hear, this was up on the hill.
Interesting.
So, and they had a KD come right through here. So.
You gotta have